Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Happy draft day. I know what you're thinking. Wait, the NFL Combine is this week. The draft is until April. What are we talking about? Now, we are drafting the top stories of this college football offseason because it has been that kind of offseason. It's one of those where any one of these that we'll talk about would have been number one in most past off seasons. So Pete Nakos from On 3 is going to join us in a couple of minutes, and we are going to talk about this. We are going to draft the top stories of the offseason. I have my big board. Let me put it this way. There is a certain big story that popped in the past 2 weeks that when I initially sent in the big board, I forgot it. And it's one of those that would have been the biggest story of any offseason in the past 10 years before that. So that is what we're dealing with here. But before we talk to Pete, we do need to get in a little bit of court storming talk because it is the topic that has dominated conversation. Obviously, the big story after Kyle Filipowski from Duke was hurt while the Wake Forest students stormed the court on Saturday. We have another court storming on Monday night. No incidents here, but a tremendous call. We take you to Itta, Mississippi, home of the Mississippi Valley State Delta Devils. And well, we're going to let play-by-play man Caleb Brunson take it away from here.
We in here and Andre, that's game! And that will be game! And that will be game! And that's downfield that first win! First oh, we stormed the court! And we're storming the court! We're storming the court! Oh my God! Oh my God! That's a complex! Delta Devils pick up their first win! Delta Devils pick up their first win! Shout out Coach Ivory! And the Delta Devils will improve to 1-27, 1-14. In a swag! What is you saying? The Mississippi Valley Delta Devils are currently on a one-game winning streak.
One-game winning streak. They're 1-27. They're 1-14 in SWAC play. When you might only call one win per season, you call the hell out of it. Caleb Brunson and Andre Williams on the call. So Caleb Brunson is a student at Mississippi Valley State. He's a former SWAC, all SWAC cornerback. He played for the football team there. And so we might have Caleb on. I want that dude hired at ESPN tomorrow. I want him calling games in conference tournament season. Like, we just fly him around. Like, today, SEC tournament. Tomorrow, ACC tournament. Next day, Big East tournament. Like, I want Caleb on various calls because I think he's going to make them fun. So that was that court storming was the tamest one you'll ever see, though. There were probably, about 20 people? And they were off the floor before the players even started shaking hands. But they ran out of the court, they danced a little bit, and it came right back off. So maybe that's the way you do it. But it's interesting because everybody has an opinion on this thing. I put a column out on 3 yesterday, and very similar to what we were talking about on the show, where I think if you're in charge, if you're a commissioner, if you're an athletic director, you got to be dead set against this. You got to be like, you can't do this. We're going to make rules against it. And the reason is because if somebody, God forbid, does really get hurt or dies in one of these things, you're going to be sued. And you need to have this defense that, hey, we've been trying to stop this all along. We've taken this measure and this measure and this measure. So like if you're Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and the SEC banned this in 2004, by the way. If you're Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, if you're, Tony Petitti of the Big Ten, you have to feel this way. If you're Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletic director, you have to feel this way. And I'd be more worried, I think, about the football one because it's so many people. They're coming down off a high wall. There's thousands of them ultimately once they get to where they're going. So I get why they're worried about this. And here's the thing. You've banned it. Like the SEC's banned it. It's been banned for almost 20 years in the SEC, and it has not stopped anybody. LSU stormed the court last week when they beat Kentucky. It hasn't stopped anybody. So people are going to keep doing it. So my thing is figure out how to deal with it. Now, again, I don't know that you can have the count. Like a lot of people said, have a countdown clock. James Fletcher who's going to join us later to talk basketball. He says, have the countdown clock, rope off the court, and then drop the rope 30 seconds in, whatever you need to get the other team off the court. But I think you could just teach some etiquette, keep your phone in your pocket till you get to midcourt. Don't talk to the opposing players. Don't look at the opposing players. Do not touch the opposing players. And again, I'm a big advocate of an opposing player can do whatever they want to you if you talk smack to them in a court storming, because you're in their space and you're not supposed to be there. So again, I advocate the Jermaine O'Neal treatment for fans who talk smack in a court storming. And if you haven't seen the clip of Jermaine O'Neal and the Pistons fan, look it up on YouTube. And just remember that if Jermaine O'Neal had not slipped in soda, he would have killed that man. So be careful when you're doing this. Have fun, but be careful and keep your phone in your pocket until you get to midcourt. Then you can do your selfies. Then you can put it on the gram. It'll be fine. But yeah, everybody has an opinion on it. Greg Byrne, the Alabama AD, said, well, let's stop tomorrow if after the court storming you say, okay, congratulations, your team just lost this game. Forfeit. This feels a little extreme to me. I don't know. One of the things the SEC kicked around last year was for football or basketball, but football especially would be really bad, is take away a home game and basically say you have to play this team on the road 2 years in a row. That might do the trick. But again, it's awfully extreme. You're taking money out of people's pockets. I don't think the schools are going to go for that. But there's a way to manage this without it becoming something that you have to completely ban or arrest a bunch of people. It is fun. Seth Davis asks, well, you never see this in the NBA. Of course you don't, Seth. There aren't 1,000 college students sitting right next to the court in the NBA. People are too busy trying to beat traffic. It's one of the things that makes college sports fun. We should embrace it. I do understand why the people in charge need to at least come out publicly against it. That said, it's fun. No one has died. One rolled ankle probably shouldn't stop this. But there's a better way to manage it. The man who has all the answers, who knows how to manage it all, that's Pete Nakos. We're going to get to him. We're going to draft our biggest offseason college football stories in probably the newsiest college football offseason ever. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/Staples. Sign up. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with a $5 bet. FanDuel is America's best sports book. It is the easiest way to get some action on the game. And there are a lot of games to put action on. In fact, we're going to talk to James Fletcher later in the show about some great college basketball action tonight. You got Kentucky on the road at Mississippi State. Mississippi State is favored. It is one of those situations. Remember, like the Duke-Wake Forest game. Wake Forest was favored on FanDuel going into that game by 2.5 points. The Demon Deacons covered. Maybe those fans were storming the court to celebrate the cover. Maybe they had the Demon Deacons minus 2.5 going into that game. But this is one of those situations. Kentucky's the ranked team. Kentucky's the potentially higher seeded team in the NCAA tournament, but they are the underdog on the road. So go to FanDuel.com/Staples. Sign up right now. $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets. Now, let's talk to Pete Nakos because we have to draft the biggest stories of the college football offseason. Court storming, trying to get up there, but it's more of a basketball story right now, Pete.
I did not put it on my list, Andy. But if we want to sit down and like late April and chop it up the basketball season, that would definitely probably be top 3 at the very least.
Absolutely. Well, and if we have something happen in football, then I think, but it is interesting because I have somewhat enjoyed because the angst from the Duke community.
Yeah.
And specifically the Duke community in the media about this. A lot of people have pointed out that they didn't seem to mind when Duke's football fans rushed the field after they beat Clemson on that Labor Day night game.
Facts. Yeah. It's Man, I must have watched the replay of Filipowski getting ran into against Wake Forest like 10 times just to like take it in. And
We got to Zapruder it. You need the view from above, like the one with Caitlin Clark, where you realize, oh, Caitlin Clark's giving this lady the business too.
She's throwing hands. No, I don't know.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting to try to like take in and then also analyze. And I don't really think there's a right opinion. That's just my read on the situation.
I think you're right. Unfortunately, that's bad internet. So you have to have a strong opinion one way or the other. You have to hate it, or you have to be like, no, just let the fans be on the court during the game.
Yeah.
Let them be an obstacle course for the player. So there's only the internet. You're only allowed to be on one pole or the other. You're not allowed. The nuances.
I've learned
is
that
not really encouraged.
I've learned that, but with this one specifically, I'm like, I think it's what makes college sports great. I also understand Duke's going to try to go win a national title, and the last thing you want to see is Kyle Filipowski hurt for a few games.
Right. And also, if I were an AD, I would say ban it, because I know I'm getting sued if somebody gets hurt on my court. So, yeah. All right. Let's get to this, because Pete, I woke up this morning, and I won't say which story it is because I think it's gonna get drafted in our top 10. But I woke up this morning and realized I had not put a story on my big board that would have been the biggest story in any of the past 10 years. That's how many stories we have to deal with here.
I'll just start this off by saying that, like, I thought I had a really good list, and then I slept on it, and then I tried to like rank them this morning, and I was like, oh man, like I think I left something out. So I'm interested to hear yours and see comparison.
Yeah, because I'm curious to see where you go with stuff, because there are things that kind of start locally, but then their butterfly effect goes national. Yeah, and it affects a lot more things than you might think initially. So you're the guest, so I'm going to give you the first pick. So what is your number one pick for the wildest story in the wildest college football offseason ever?
You have to go with Nick Saban. Nick Saban retiring from Alabama is by far the biggest news story of this cycle. What he's accomplished in Tuscaloosa we may never see again in college football. And I think beyond the implications of him leaving Alabama, you also have to look at like what it did to the college football landscape entering the 2024 season. And right now you have a new head coach at Washington, at Arizona. Kalen DeBoer all of a sudden is in Tuscaloosa and is expected to get the Tide back to winning SEC title games. And by far, to me, that is the biggest story this offseason.
And I'm with you. That's the one I would have picked too. And it is that one, that butterfly effect, just mushroom. I mean, Kenny Matalolo got the San Jose State job.
Yeah.
As a result of that. But it affected, you had the Caleb Downs transfer, you had the Caden Proctor transfer, you had just how many coaches has Nick Saban gotten fired in the SEC? Like, who will people be able to keep their jobs longer? I don't know. Maybe Kirby Smart just gets everybody fired now. But it feels like, because I spent so many years, and like every offseason in the mailbag, you get the question, well, what happens after Nick Saban retires? And it was like, well, if you're LSU or Texas A&M, or like, think about Mississippi State, they beat Saban's team in 2007,
right?
And they haven't beaten them since.
Yeah,
I don't think Arkansas ever beat Saban.
I don't think so. I don't think, and I mean, another big, right? I know LSU has had a lot of success, but what this does for Brian Kelly and opens the potential to win a national title, possibly, like it's wild. It's why we love college football, though.
It is. And, I just like now what happens to Alabama too, because you've got, like, we've talked about their win total. We brought Tim Watts on and talked about that 9.5 win total, which is the lowest actually since 2016. But what are realistic expectations for Alabama? It's so hard to figure out, because we just assumed they were going to compete for the national title every year. They still have a great roster. So I feel like that's something we can continue to assume until proven otherwise, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know you and I are going to talk about this a lot in the coming weeks, but like, I think this 2024 season at Alabama is going to be defined by the 2-week period in April with the transfer portal. Because while you are correct that they still have a very talented roster, there's a few aspects of that roster that really have some holes that need filled that are going to have to be addressed.
Yes, and the other piece of this, and I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, because for those who don't know, there is a rule in the SEC that says if you want to transfer to another SEC school from one to the other and play that next season, you have to do it in the winter window. You can't do it in the spring window. So that we think, and then the SEC folks kicked around the idea of repealing that last year. And they're like, no, we actually think it calms everything down, because they find that most SEC players want to play in the SEC. But there is a program shopping this post-spring that has some holes in the roster that is a place you'd go.
Yes.
That isn't in the SEC, and it's Michigan. And that brings me to my first pick, which is Jim Harbaugh leaving Michigan for the NFL. And it's interesting that we both went with two localized stories of a coach leaving a program instead of one of these big national rules things. But I also think this had a massive butterfly effect. I mean, Pete, just last week, we were still talking about guys following Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. And I think what makes this so big is everything that happened beforehand. He just won the national title. You'd had the Connor Stallion stuff, the scouting stuff, Cheeseburger Gate, NCAA stuff, and you have him winning the national title and then going back to the NFL to chase the Super Bowl title that eluded him. Remember, the man that, what do they get to the 7-yard line, down 5 in the Super Bowl when the 49ers played the Ravens? They were this close. Like, it's incredible. And it opens up all this strange stuff for Michigan. Now, you had Sharon Moore elevated to the head coaching job, but like you said, Michigan in the spring portal, probably the most prominent shopper.
By far. And obviously the 30-day window that opened with Harbaugh leaving just closed, and I was kind of reviewing the roster, and I mean, all the eyes are going to be on the quarterback position this spring, right? Does Alex Orji rise to that? Does Sharon Moore kind of tap him as the starter entering fall camp, or does Michigan get really aggressive and try to go get someone in the portal? And what does that portal market look like at the quarterback position? I mean, past that, some really good talent returning on the defensive line, but talking to some people at Michigan too, right? You have Roman Wilson leaving. There's some questions at that wide receiver position too. And you think about the depth of the wide receiver talent in the SEC, and if some athlete down there wants to leave, I mean, I couldn't think of a better place to go. Not better place, but a place that is definitely going to need to add a wide receiver than Michigan.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's one of those places that is attractive. They've put people in the NFL. You've seen transfers thrive there. I mean, Josiah Stewart, Drake Nugent, Ladarius Henderson last year, who popped in. Oluwatimi the year before, who popped in, had a great year at Michigan, and then we see what happens next. But it is really interesting. And the Harbaugh piece of it, what will Sharon Moore do? I think we feel more confident in Sharon Moore as a game day coach because we got to see him be a game day coach for 4 games last year, including the Penn State game and the Ohio State game. Right. That's the interesting thing, because Ryan Day and Sharon Moore are the only people I can think of who are really in that situation. We've seen interims, I guess, Ed Orgeron when he was made the LSU head coach, but it is it's interesting when you see a blue blood program get taken over by somebody on the staff, but you feel like what they are as a game day coach. Yeah,
and the other thing that I think we have to give props to Sharon Moore for is, I mean, he locked down that roster in the last 30 days, right? Keon
Sabb's the only one that.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people pointing out the academic calendar, but if an athlete really wanted to leave Michigan, they probably would have found a way to leave.
Yeah, because there are players on that roster who will be coveted by every single team in the country.
Yes, 100%.
Kenneth Grant, I think is one of the best 5 players coming back in college football next year. Yep. And I'm sure I'm probably not speculating here. I'm sure he got tampered with.
Oh,
and he's staying. So as far as we know, but it sounds like he's very intent on staying. But I mean, this was huge, and it's one of those that, like, I remember in the moments after the national title game, and I asked Jim Harbaugh after he did the seat at the big kids table speech. I said, "Do you want to add a Super Bowl to this?" And he's like, "Can I just enjoy this for a night?" But the problem is we already knew this was coming. Like, we knew this was going to happen, and then it was just a will he or won't he with the Chargers. But yeah, I mean, and the thing about this too, the last time we saw a guy win a national title and then leave for pro football was Howard Schnellenberger in the 80s, going from Miami to the USFL.
It's just so like uncharted waters to an extent, and it's like it leaves so much uncertainty at Michigan. Not that Sherrone Moore isn't capable, but obviously, like, what does the Big Ten look like, and does Michigan contend for their fourth Big Ten title in a row, or does Oregon come? I mean, so many intriguing headlines right now in Ann Arbor and across the Big Ten entering 2024.
You just gave me a thought, and it's your picks next, but I don't even know if we can include these as picks. I was thinking, you just reminded me.
Oh, like, no.
Texas, Oklahoma, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA entering their new conferences this offseason. I don't think that's news that popped. Like, we all knew that was coming, but that's another piece of this offseason. Like, it's crazy.
It wasn't on my list. What is your next pick? It was so this is where it gets interesting. Like, I'm going to go with Tennessee winning the preliminary injunction hearing against the NCAA, but that was a very close third to a few other things that I'm sure you're going to mention. The reason why I picked that one is because while there's all these lawsuits against the NCAA, and this is not the death blow, this really leaves the NCAA in a pickle, right? You read the statement from the governing body on Friday, and right away they mentioned Congress, and then I reported yesterday on the letter that Charlie Baker sent out to membership. And I mean, the reality here is, Andy, is I don't really know if the NCAA knows what the next move is. And when you get such a huge governing body like that in this situation, in my mind, it has to be one of the bigger storylines. And there's some other lawsuits that I'm sure we're going to talk about that they're facing legal pressures, but this one, to me, and not really being able to govern negotiations and NIL, and it's just so much to unpack and so important.
It feels like they have to go back to the drawing board, and whether that's the NCAA leadership or the schools themselves, I think it's more the schools themselves have to do it, and they have to go back to the drawing board and come up with rules that are going to be deemed legal, that are going to be within the boundaries of the Sherman Act, which unfortunately it feels like the Alston case and the way it went down 9-0 in the Supreme Court, and how aggressive the justices were, specifically Brett Kavanaugh, but even the Neil Gorsuch opinion. If you read between the lines of that one, it was basically saying we're gonna declare everything we see illegal here because you're not giving the players any say in this. So they've got to figure that out. We'll see. There's, oh my God, I just realized I don't have the Dartmouth players being considered employees on my big board, which probably should be on it too. God dang. But I will go to my next pick because we'll probably come back to something like this. But yes, there are no NIL rules right now. Like, think about that. The entirety of the time. So the NCAA was basically created because there was a safety issue in college football. Players were dying at the turn of the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt brings the presidents of the football playing schools up, and he's like, you got to figure this out. So that's why it formed, but it very quickly morphed into how do we keep players from getting money? And that was basically the primary function of the NCAA. There were two of them: stage championship events and keep players from getting money. They now have no capacity to keep players from getting money at all. So your whole reason for existing for the past 75 years is now null and void. Think about that.
I mean, I was talking to a source yesterday, Andy, who was basically like, So the NCAA is just going to become a championship organization now? Like at this point,
Event management.
Yeah. There's another item on this list that I'm confident we both have, and we'll chop that up. But I think there's a group that could really step in and make an impact.
Oh, I like where you're coming with this. Oh, I think that's another thing I probably forgot. All right, here we go. This is the one that I woke up this morning and realized I didn't have on my big board, and I needed to put it on the big board. We have yet to see a 12-team version of the college football playoff. That's going to happen this year. But now we know the college football playoff is probably going to expand again in 2026. What? It's amazing. Like, that's just one of those things that was bubbling under the surface. They were talking about it a little bit. And then a couple of weeks ago, it's just boom. Here's this too.
So, Andy, let me ask you this. I think this is a good way to take this conversation. Are you in favor of 14 or 16?
Well, so the way I would do it, I actually wrote this the other day. If you're going to move up to 14, you may as well move up to 16 because it doesn't change how many rounds you have. Whether it's 12, 14, or 16, it's still 4 rounds. Like, I don't think you want to go past 4 rounds. I know that all the FCS and the other divisions do. They have a 24 team, so they have a 5-round playoff. I don't think you want to go past 4 rounds. I would say if you go to 16, it takes away the need for auto bids at all. Like, do top 16. Like, you don't have to guarantee the group of 5 a place in there because most years, 1 or 2 group of 5 teams will be in the top 16 and will make it. And that way you also don't have to codify preferential treatment for the SEC or the Big 10 or the ACC or the Big 12 because I do think if you piss off the wrong person down the road, that invites a lawsuit. So I think now people hate the subjective selection process. And I get that, but you can't have an objective selection. Like the NFL's playoff process is objective. Like you win your division or you have one of the best records in your conference and then you get made a wild card. You can't do that unless you split all this up into like a super league that had geographically and competitively balanced divisions. Yeah. Since that's not happening right now, and I used to say it'll never happen, I'm not saying that anymore, but it's not happening right now. I say lean into the subjectivity, which gives us something to talk about, gives everybody something to argue about. And also, if you are not considered if you're the one on the cut line who winds up being considered the 17th best team instead of the 16th best team, you really don't have a claim on the national title anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And I like subjective, right? That's how we do the tournament, the NCAA tournament, March Madness, and it's just so much more fun to watch and see how it come together and do bracketology for the college football playoff. So it's going to be fun to kind of watch it all come together.
Oh, that's right. We have to be playoff bracketologists now. I didn't even think about that.
JD Piquet nominated me, so I feel like I need to really.
I think you could be the Joe Lunardi of college football.
We're gonna try to give it a run.
You need a basement, like you need that basement bunker. That would be the best way to do it. And we would come to you every Sunday night. All right, Pete, let's break this down. And you've got the big graphics behind you. I love it. Listen, we're going to get the On3 tech team on this. I don't know if you have a basement where you live now.
I don't,
we can bring some shovels.
Yeah. We'll make one. Yeah. It's Steve Kornacki, right? With the khaki pants. Yeah.
It is. It is.
Yep. We can definitely get some of that.
You got to roll up the sleeves.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to wear collared shirts. Oh yeah. Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So sticking with my next pick, I am picking the the Department of Justice joining the transfer portal lawsuit with a few other states.
I didn't even have that one on my board.
But this draft pick does not focus on the Department of Justice. It focuses on the fact that the Department of Justice joins, and then shortly after, I believe, or in this period, the NCAA sends out the memo that 2-time transfers can transfer immediately without securing a waiver. And I think that has completely changed a lot of how top programs are kind of approaching the transfer portal and free agency. And I think
Well,
we'll
the
see it
other
in
part of it
basketball.
is, in football this spring, you might see some dudes who transferred in the winter go through spring practice and be like, "Ooh, maybe I don't want to be here."
Yeah.
It could be, but that one was interesting because I think the one-time transfers, like I think it's perfectly reasonable to say you can have one free transfer and then afterward you have to sit out a year. Like I don't have a problem with that at all, and I'm Mr. Players' Rights, but I don't have a problem with that rule at all. And that rule lasted about 5 minutes in federal court, which told me that every other thing is going to be declared illegal in federal court.
It sure seems like we're on that path. And obviously that's also a preliminary injunction. I mean, the NCAA is obviously facing a lot of them, but I think that one just really kind of changes the landscape of current college football and college basketball.
It definitely does. It definitely does. All right. I'm going to go back toward the field with another one that Adam Schefter brought up something about this. Well, this one isn't a college to NFL move, but it is a move for the same reasons as you're seeing some of the college to NFL moves. Chip Kelly leaves the head coaching job at UCLA to become Ohio State's offensive coordinator. Now, this actually started the first domino in the chain reaction. First of all, Chip Kelly was trying to get NFL offensive coordinator jobs. He didn't get one. But the first domino in all of this is Jeff Hafley leaving Boston College as the head coach to become the Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator. Boston College hires Bill O'Brien, who had just been hired as the OC at Ohio State. Chip Kelly then goes to work for his former quarterback and former assistant, Ryan Day, at Ohio State. And the think pieces that came out of this move. Chip Kelly's leaving a head coaching job to be an OC in the same league. Holy crap, what's going on? It was a pretty big deal, though.
I don't think it's a trend yet, Andy. I know everybody wants to call it a trend. Now, all that said, I think Chip going from UCLA to Ohio State needs a lot more analysis. And the fact that, he wanted out. I don't know if he was completely meshing with Martin Jarmond. I think there's a lot.
They were going to fire him after this season. If it wasn't perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the one that the thing that really kind of pokes holes in the people are leaving college for the NFL is earlier this week, right? Eric Bieniemy took the OC job at UCLA.
Yes.
So he obviously
Bill O'Brien is another one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but it's so intriguing. And I had Jeff Hafley and Chip Kelly grouped together. So we're kind of aligned on
that. And the other piece of this is Ohio State is loading up.
Oh, yeah.
That because like Michigan last year, where their best players decided to come back, and you looked at that roster and you're like, oh my God, how many of these guys are going to be in the draft next year? How many guys are going to get drafted? How many guys are going to see at the combine next year? You do the same thing looking at Ohio State's roster for 2024. It's like this defense is loaded, and now they have Chip Kelly calling plays.
Yeah,
on the offensive side with a bunch of really good players.
I might get a little lambasted here. Do they have the best OC and DC in college football, or top 5 at each spot?
Well, I think that I think so. I think, Chip Kelly is a pure play caller, and him not having to deal with the other stuff, which is really what this came down to.
Right.
And Chip Kelly, by the way, always hated dealing with the other stuff. This is not a new phenomenon for Chip Kelly. Like, there's a reason he took UCLA when he had an offer from UCLA and from Florida. Like, he was looking at how you have to recruit to win at Florida, and he's like, I don't want any part of that. So this is on brand for Chip Kelly. But as a pure play caller, I have a lot of faith in Chip Kelly. And I think Jim Knowles, you saw last year the improvement that he brought to Ohio State's defense. So that is a great call. That actually sounds like a future offseason show topic, is best coordinator tandems. That's we could have some fun with that one. But that's I'm now going in my mind through all the other ones. They're not a lot that really match up.
There's some like really great like one-offs, but it's hard to find a duo at some of these schools. So
The truth is a Michigan fan in the chat.
Dive into it.
He says that the Ohio State roster is like the 2011 Philadelphia Eagles ended with 4-12. No, I don't think so. I'm sorry, the truth. I know you've got your 3-game winning streak and you're coming off the national title. They have a good reason to be excited this year. They absolutely do. All right, Pete, what is your next one?
So, man, how many do I have left? That's like what I'm trying to get. Like, I don't know what my last one is. And so
I would say we can do 3 more apiece.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to go down with the SEC and the Big Ten forming a joint advisory group.
The advisory group.
Not sound overly nerdy here, but I think that this move signifies a lot about what the future of college sports could look like. I think coming off the heels of everything that happened in Tennessee this past week, I think now more than ever, the NCAA and college sports kind of needs leadership to spring up from within. And it's clear that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti have all the money and all the power, and they're probably the ones who are going to have to do it. So I know while 2 weeks ago that Greg Sankey and Petitti kind of went on the record and were like, we're not trying to take over college sports. And I totally respect this, but from my perspective,
of course you're trying to take over college sports. Like, you're not fooling anybody here. And look, you may have to. And that's my thing. Like, they may have to do that. They may not have another choice because they need to operate their own businesses. And the only way they might be able to do that is take over and create their own rules. And Pete, if we're really getting nerdy here, this may be the number one thing. Like, when we look back on this in 5-10 years, this may be the number one thing that happened this offseason in terms of importance. This is why when earlier I said, I don't say it'll never happen, that there's a super league and it's divided. No, I think there's a chance it could happen. Like, these guys may have to make it happen.
I think there's a larger percent chance than ever that we see a super league or even the CFP split off and do their own thing, led by Sankey and Petitti in the SEC and Big Ten.
Yeah, and it makes you figure out it makes economic sense, it makes common sense, and the further this goes, you just may have to. And I'll throw my next one out there. The ACC and Florida State sue one another. The ACC sues Florida State before Florida State can sue the ACC, and they both end up dueling lawsuits.
That's another one that could be number one in like 2 years.
Right. We don't know how this is going to end. We do know that neither side wants to take this thing to trial. That the results of losing a trial are pretty disastrous. Actually, more disastrous for the ACC than they are for Florida State. But Florida State being stuck in the ACC till 2036 would be viewed as a disaster by them. So I think they will settle eventually, and it will allow Florida State out, which will allow Clemson out, which will allow North Carolina out. And I've gotten a lot of pushback on what I said last week on the show and the column I wrote, where I said I think they're gonna settle. There's a number somewhere. I didn't say the number was low. The number is very high, but the ACC had to admit there's a number. And that's the part that the lawyers who keep coming at me don't understand, because they're not dealing with this every day. I get your legal analysis of this stuff. I understand that they have to say, because Florida State has argued that it's too punitive, the amount you'd have to pay to get out of the grant of rights. They have to say it's a commercial possibility. It's just an alternative. You could pay for those rights back. I get that.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that they spent 10 years pretending there was no number, that there was no price. There's a price. We know there's a price because Texas and Oklahoma bought their way out of the Big 12 one the last year. So there's a number. And Florida State may get to that number. They may get private equity may plow in enough money, or there may be a way they get to the number as the ACC sees it now. But the ACC, the second they actually set a number, the clock ticks on the conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's somewhere between like 250 and 350 million. That's just like my read on it. It could be higher, but man, the minute Florida State leaves, you got to consider, right, like how big of a brand that is, what it means to ESPN, who has the grant of rights, and then also how, like, then there's precedent, right, that Clemson or North Carolina or Virginia or Miami could leave. I mean, so you lose like two of those, like it's over for the ACC.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everyone's like, the ACC is not going to just let them leave. No, they're not going to just let them leave. They're going to take this as far as they can go. But if there's a non-zero chance that the ACC might lose that lawsuit, whether it gets, and we don't even know if it's going to be in North Carolina or Florida. I think it's probably North Carolina, ultimately, the one the ACC filed. But if there's a non-zero chance that they might lose, they have to think about a settlement, because if they lose, everybody can leave for free.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, I'm going to draft one, and I want to start this off by saying, River, it's not on my list, and I apologize. Sorry, our producer, River. Steve Sarkisian staying at Texas and Dan Lanning staying at Oregon are two of the biggest offseason news items that maybe don't get the most traction. And I'm well aware that maybe they weren't the biggest names for to take over at Nick Saban at Alabama. But I think those two guys staying where they did is great for the sport of college football. It makes two of the better brands in college football more appealing. And both now have a chance to go win national titles this year.
So I'm going to throw in there that you actually broke, a story that you broke on the day the transfer portal opened for the winter window. Kyle McCord transferring from Ohio State. I think that not just for that particular story itself, but for what it signaled for everybody, because that's not just a player wanting more NIL money, wanting to leave. That's how cutthroat is this going to become? Because this was the incumbent starter at a place with great expectations for next season, a great roster coming into next season, but he was not guaranteed the job. He was not guaranteed that they wouldn't recruit over him in the transfer portal. So he's looking at that like, am I certain that I'm the starter here next year? Or do I try to go to a place where I am going to be for certain the starter next year? And he winds up at Syracuse. I thought that one, low key, one of the biggest stories of the offseason.
Totally. All right, I'm going to go with a fun one here. EA Sports College Football 25 releasing the teaser trailer, announcing the opt-in program for NIL for athletes signing deals with EA. I mean, we're going to get all the details in May, Andy, but this is what college football fans have been waiting for a decade, and everyone's excited, including you and me.
My son is going to be so shocked when his PlayStation disappears from his room and winds up in my office. It's going to happen. I'm not telling him when, but it's going to happen.
Some online dynasties.
Exactly. Oh, listen, I am going to build the greatest South Carolina program the world has ever seen. Trust me. I predict, by the way, that Kansas will be the most popular team to play with, because everybody likes to build a dynasty with a team that hasn't been historically great. And I think Jalen Daniels being able to play with him, play as him, he's already opted into the game. That's the guy. I think Kansas and Kansas State might be the two most fun teams to play with Jalen Daniels and Avery Johnson as your quarterbacks. So I can't wait for that. All right, one more from me, and it's another player situation, the Dylan Raiola flip. Because I think that was another one that this is a unique situation because he's a legacy at Nebraska, but we got a guy who decided not to go to the superpower where he would have been stacked up with some other really good quarterback recruits and have to compete for that job and have to wait out Carson Beck. Instead, he goes to Nebraska. Remember, Kyle McCord was on a visit at about the same time. Suddenly, Kyle McCord and Nebraska weren't going to come together. It certainly sounds like Dylan Raiola will be given every opportunity to be the starting quarterback at Nebraska this year. So this is the sort of thing we wondered, will this happen? We've seen it with we've seen it with Nico going to Tennessee, Dylan Raiola going to Nebraska, where perhaps NIL does change the way people look at this stuff.
Yeah, and on a bigger level too, right? Like, I think we won't know the answer for, I guess, 3 years, but does Dylan Raiola going to Nebraska prove to be the turning point of the Matt Rule era for the Huskers? I mean, he's got all the tools to start on day
one way or the other, Pete.
One way or the other. Exactly. One way or the other. I mean, he's got all the tools. It looks like a great pickup. I guess we'll have to kind of see how it plays out, though.
It's going to be amazing. So, Pete, that was incredible. There's still
I got a list, man.
On the list.
Yeah.
The Caleb Downs transfer, I didn't get to that one.
I mean, we didn't even talk about the NLRB deeming Dartmouth athletes employees. Yeah,
it's employees. Yeah, I threw that in there. That actually may be the most important ultimately after.
I mean, there's so much. I even had NCAA coming down at Florida State about NIL. Yeah. I mean, jeez. It's not March 1st. Let's go.
No, it's not March 1st, but that's why we have to say goodbye to you, Pete.
Yeah.
Because James Fletcher III from On3 is here to talk college hoops because it is almost March 1st. So, Pete, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We'll talk to you again very soon.
See you guys.
All right. It is time to bring on James. What's up, James? We got to talk some college hoops.
Yeah, we got plenty to talk about.
Somebody broke the Saturday Big Monday jinx. The North Carolina Tar Heels did it. They gutted out a win against Miami 2 days after beating Virginia. I'm thinking I might put the Tar, when the bracket comes out, I might have North Carolina in my Final Four.
They did prove something that very few have been able to do. They've held on at the end there. It got a little dicey in those final seconds. But, yeah, big win for North Carolina. A bad loss for Miami on the other side, where they really were desperately clinging to the wrong side of the bubble, and I think they've just about fallen off of it at this point with that loss. That would have been big for their resume, but not able to complete that comeback.
Well, let's talk about North Carolina, because a couple of years ago they make the run to the national title game. They knock out Coach K in his final game in the Final Four. Did not live up to expectations last year, but it certainly feels like this is what Hubert Davis wanted to have at North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think the first few years under Hubert Davis have been really a roller coaster, because we think back to that first season, and we think about that NCAA tournament run, being able to surge past Duke, to make all those memories. But let's not forget that they were on the bubble for much of that season. That was no guarantee that he was going to get them into the field. Really a couple weeks before the NCAA tournament, they went on a run. They were able to put things together. Brady Manick, kind of an unsung hero of that group, the graduate transfer from Oklahoma. He went on just an absolute tear, knocking down just about every shot that he took. And then, of course, you take that momentum into the next season, and everyone says, well, everyone but Brady Manick is back from that roster. They bring in some recruits. Of course, they're going to be the number one team in the country. What do? Immediately out of the top 25, become the first team in, I don't remember the exact stat, but one of the first teams in forever to go from number one in the preseason to outside of the NCAA tournament field. And it was kind of the panic button was hit at North Carolina. What is the Hubert Davis era going to be? Is it going to be highs and lows? Or did we all get fooled by one good month of basketball? Because we were this close to having two straight non-NCAA tournament seasons. But then he comes in. This year they go in and they change up the roster a little bit. Of course, Caleb Love ends up hitting the exit door. And RJ Davis and Armando Bacot, there were, I think, some questions from people around the country. Can that duo really take you to the level that North Carolina should be at, given the fact that they just hadn't in the last few years? Well, this year they really have. And we talked about last time I was on, they are the 5th overall seed. They're the one knocking at the door, waiting for one of those 1 seeds to fall off that line. And I think that really just it comes down to it's nothing against Caleb Love, nothing against anyone else who was in that program last year, but the fit, the basketball fit is just a little bit better, and they seem to have a great chemistry, and that just comes with playing better basketball sometimes. I think that RJ Davis at the guard spot, him having more freedom, being on the ball a lot more, has opened him up. Armando Bacot not having to worry about trying to get two guards involved in the play has opened him up to do a little bit more on the post. Of course, he's got some shooters around him. Cormac Ryan comes in there. And so I think that they just have a little bit better flow, and you hope that this is some kind of formula that Hubert Davis is able to repeat and continue to put on the floor for North Carolina.
I know the ACC isn't necessarily completely happy with the depth of the league this year, but have North Carolina and Duke be good at the same time again, finally. And I realize it's only been 2 years since they both made the Final Four together, but we didn't expect North Carolina to be there that year. This is what you'd hope for. Now, Kyle Filipowski, we'll see what happens. They're playing Louisville on Wednesday night. I would assume if he's still hurt from the Wake Forest court storming or sore at all, you don't need to play him in that game. But hopefully he's okay. You tweeted this out, and I think you and I are on the same page on the court stormings. Like, look, there's a way to manage this. You had a good one where you do a countdown clock on the Jumbotron that says, what do you do? 30 seconds?
I mean, I was thinking like even just 10. You do it slowly, though, where it adds up to about 15 seconds. But it really doesn't take that long to get guys off the court and at least headed towards the tunnel. And, of course, from there, you've got security, like real security. Like I know we joke about the security out there with the little thin rope, and they're kind of just letting people run by them. But once you get to the tunnel, that's real security. You don't see anyone make their way down the tunnel.
Yeah, because there's cops in the tunnel.
So I think that once you can get them to the tunnel, then you do whatever you want, because it is fun to have that shot and that view of everyone being able to party, to celebrate what they just accomplished. And so I think it's a really good compromise. I know that everyone wants to go like one side or the other, either just let it keep happening right at the buzzer or ban it all out. But I just think that there's got to be some kind of middle ground there where we can get them off the court. And it's not like the fans are going anywhere in those 10 seconds it takes before you could have them then come down on the floor.
So speaking of bad blood, Texas is going to Lubbock to play Texas Tech on Tuesday night. And how much, obviously Texas Tech fans hate Texas anyway, but the Chris Beard thing really just stuck in their craw. When he first, the first time he came back, it was just like the most intense regular season college basketball atmosphere you're going to ever see. Is it the same now that it's Rodney Terry, or does that step off a little bit?
I think it has to diminish a little bit. You don't have Chris Beard, of course, like you talked about. They felt like he really did just kind of leave them out to dry. And you also don't have Mark Adams on the other sideline,
right?
A former Chris Beard assistant going up against his boss. And so there's not as many big storylines, but of course it is Texas and Texas Tech. There's going to be some bad blood there. There's going to be a rivalry. And I think that it is kind of heightened by the fact that Texas really needs this win to continue cementing their resume in the NCAA tournament. They don't have some of the computer numbers that other Big 12 schools have that are kind of boosting them up and helping get them through this Big 12 schedule. They need a couple more wins against the quad 2 and quad 1 opponents. And I think this opportunity against Texas Tech is a really big one for the Longhorns.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game, and we love those midweek Big 12 games. Like going on the road in the Big 12 is no fun. So Texas, enjoy Lubbock, enjoy United Supermarkets Arena, which is a very weird name for a very scary place to play. Speaking of places that could be scary to play, the Hump in Starkville is going to be the scene of a very big game in the SEC. Kentucky loses to LSU last week on the buzzer beater, where Dillingham, I kind of felt like he emerged as the guy you want to see with the ball in his hands, and they still lose, but then they smash Alabama, and now they're going to the Hump, and it's almost identical situation to that Duke Wake Forest game, where you've got the higher ranked, potentially higher seeded team on the road. They are a Vegas underdog. I think Mississippi State's a 3.5-point favorite in this game. But this could be a fun one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun. A real clash of styles, too. Mississippi State has no interest in sprinting up and down the floor for 40 minutes. They want to get the ball inside to Tolu Smith. They want to use Cam Matthews, DJ Jeffries, and they want to be physical in the way that they play. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup to see. Can Kentucky either just outrun them, because that's what they ultimately did to Alabama, an Alabama team that wants to run too. But they really just got out and played such a fast pace and were just flying up and down the floor. Alabama really fell into the trap, I think, of playing just so fast that they weren't worried about what kind of shot they were getting. And by the time they looked up, it was already well out of hand, and there was no way to come back into that game. But you talked about the Rob Dillingham situation. Yeah. I think it's so interesting for Kentucky because he is their best NBA player or best NBA prospect. Right. He is their best offensive player. You saw what he was able to do on that final shot against LSU. I mean, that is an NBA level play. That is the play that you run to win a basketball game. The only problem is he did it with 15 seconds left on the clock. There was no need for him to shoot it that early. And it kind of goes into this narrative around Rob Dillingham that there's just these little things, whether it's the situational awareness or the overall defense, because his defense just is not at the level that John Calipari needs it to be to keep him on the floor for an entire basketball game. But
that's what everybody's like, why? How come this guy doesn't play every minute of every game? You just said why.
No, he does. He struggles on defense. And you saw it on that next possession. LSU puts up a shot. Dillingham sees the ball. He sees that it's blocked. He heads out the other direction. Now, I've seen a lot of debate. Yes, he is a guard. He has been trained, leak out in transition. But situational awareness.
Right, the game's over. You have to get the ball and the game's over.
There's 2 seconds left. Even if your man is 30 feet from the basket, there's no need to go run the other way. And so for him to run away from the play, his man gets the rebound, puts it back in, you lose the game. I mean, it's just brutal. And he admitted it. He knows. It's not like Rob Dillingham is some player who just can't accept his actions. He's doing his own thing. He wants to learn. He wants to grow. And I think that there's room for him to grow. The question is, can he grow enough between now and the end of March to where Kentucky can become a real Final Four contender with him on the floor for 30 to 35 minutes?
And we've seen that with Cal guards in the past where they have developed over the season. Marcus Teague is a prime example on the team that last won the national title.
Yeah, Marcus Teague. You look at even the guys with huge NBA success. If you want to look at Rob Dillingham and project him at the next level, a guy like Devin Booker was not a starter. He did not have a big role early in the season. Malik Monk, of course, got better throughout the course of his freshman season there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, one of the best players in the NBA, he was pretty much an unknown when he started the season at Kentucky. So there is a long track record of these guys continuing to develop. John Calipari puts them in the right situation, and he really does help them grow towards their best self on the basketball floor. But like I said, it's just a countdown clock at this point. Can Rob Dillingham reach that ceiling in time for them to win big in March?
All right, let us move to the Mountain West. Very bubblicious game going on in Fort Collins, Colorado on Tuesday night. Nevada at Colorado State. We've talked about this, Ken. The Mountain West gets 6 teams in. Nevada's got to win this one, right?
I think that, right now Nevada is the one closer to the bubble. So by default, you would say they need this win just a little bit more. But I do think that Colorado State, of those 2 teams, has done the thing that we said they can't do. We said only lose to the teams that are within that top 6, and you'll probably get the job done. Colorado State lost a game outside of that. So now they're in a little bit trickier of a situation. You've got to make sure you got to keep an eye on those computer numbers. You got to make sure that overall resume is still good enough by the time we reach Selection Sunday, because now you lose to those other top 6 teams. In addition to that loss outside of it, it could end up coming back on you just a little bit. Nevada has been red hot lately. They've really gotten things going, and they are on the right side of the bubble as we speak right now, looking to keep it that way tonight.
That's right. So if you're especially if you're playing a little FanDuel tonight, you're sprinkling some stuff around. Here's your top games for the night. Pittsburgh at Clemson, another bubble game. Nevada, Colorado State, Texas Tech, BYU, Kansas, Kentucky at Mississippi State. But that Nevada, Colorado State's your last chance game. 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, coming to you from Fort Collins. James Fletcher III, we got to talk to you again before the weekend because we're getting real close. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. The bubble keeps shifting, so we got to keep talking, I guess.
That's right. It makes me think of that thing I use at the gym where I'm trying to balance on it and also lift weights at the same. It's terrible. It's terrible feeling on the bubble. That's why you got to play your way off of it. Thanks, James.
All right, good to talk to you.
Before we go, I do want to talk about a guy I saw last night. Noah Fifita, Arizona quarterback. So there's a set of awards that have been given out the last few years. My friend Chris Doring, former Florida Gator, former Florida walk-on, wanted to honor Steve Spurrier. And so he got together with Mike Griffith of the Football Writers Association of America and created a set of awards, the Steve Spurrier Awards. And basically, they're awards for the best first-year coach, a coach in his first year with a team, because Steve Spurrier says you could do it the long way or do it just be different and win right now. And Steve Spurrier likes the second version. If you look at his career, that's what he did. But also the best freshman offensive and defensive players in college football. So Noah Fifita was the freshman offensive player of the year. He was the quarterback at Arizona, took over the job early in the season, and really just the Wildcats took off. But probably the most interesting thing about Noah Fifita, he was there with Brent Brennan, who is Arizona's new coach. Jed Fish was the guy who recruited Noah Fifita to Arizona. The assumption was that a lot of those really good Arizona players were going to follow Jed Fish to Washington. They did not. A lot of them stayed behind at Arizona, and a lot of it was that 2022 recruiting class that Noah Fifita was a part of, that Territorio McMillan, their great receiver, was a part of. They've got a core of guys that decided to stay, and Noah was thanking all those guys. But Chris asked him on the stage, what made you decide to stay? And his answer was really good.
Can I go elsewhere?
Yeah, most of it was the players in the building and the people in the building, the culture we've been able to build. I think my dad asked me why. My dad said when Coach Fish left, we were loyal to Coach Fish. We weren't loyal to a school. And he said, if you want to stay, what are you loyal to? And I kind of think about it for a while, but I realized that we're loyal to the people in the building and the players that I played with. These are the guys that I went to battle with every week. So that was a big thing.
We're happy you're here.
So if you think everybody's a mercenary and everybody's just out for themselves, most of the players in college football are going to be playing for the team they played for last year in this coming season. Most of the players feel like Noah Fifita does. And Noah Fifita had lots of options, lots of potential options if he wanted to go in the transfer portal, but he stuck with Arizona. And it was interesting after hearing him talk, hearing Brent Brennan talk. Arizona in the Big 12 this year could be really fun, because we were thinking when Jed Fish left, they went from being potentially one of the favorites in the new Big 12 to what are they going to be? We don't know. I think they could be pretty good. So we've said Utah, we've said Kansas State. Those are the ones we're watching in the new Big 12. I might add Arizona to that list. I think this team that won 10 games last year, that finished the season really strong. Yes, they lost their coach. I think they made a good hire, and you see what's still there. Now, obviously, the spring transfer portal window has to come and go, but it sounds like that group wants to play together. And I think that's a big thing these days. In this world of constantly shifting rosters, chemistry matters. And you heard Noah Fifita talk about his decision, and then a little bit later he was talking about his teammates, and you're like, ooh, okay, this is a tight group. This sounds like a group that could be pretty good. So congratulations to him. Jamie Chadwell was the Spurrier Award winner for the first-year Coach of the Year after going undefeated in the regular season at Liberty, taking the team to a Fiesta Bowl. And he talked to him for a minute. We can't reveal this because I don't want to spoil a surprise, but he's got a vacation plan that will, if you are a child of the 80s. It will make you laugh so hard when you hear what it is. We're going to talk to him after that vacation so we can reveal it on the show, but you're going to enjoy it. So great time today. Great time talking to Pete Nakos. I cannot believe how many crazy stories there have been this offseason. And like Pete said, it's not even March 1st yet. There's a lot to go. So, of course, keep it locked here. Subscribe to the On3 Sports channel. Hit that like button. Subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, wherever it is you get your podcasts. You remember now Google Podcasts come out on YouTube. So you just need to follow the On3 Sports channel. We're right there for you. Every time we go live, it'll let you know. We're everywhere. You can't escape us. And we can't escape the news this offseason. So, of course, there will be more. On Wednesday, we are going to dive into that crazy Oklahoma win total. It was the one I looked at when FanDuel came out with all those win totals where I was like, what do they know that I don't? Bring it on the Sooner Scoop guys to see if they know something that I don't, or maybe something that Vegas doesn't. We'll talk to you tomorrow.